is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse, hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable. I found it really disappointing when he told me that MasterBook wasn't like a master mold for the Sears Wish book, Stu Horvath.
Oh man, that would be something.
Yeah. Oh my God. And like it like just like in the comics, it'd like decommission it for so long, we'd have to like reactivate it, and suddenly we'd get like Sears Wish books, and then there's like sweet like chick tract size books that used to come in with like the Kenner toys to like show you like all the different like Star Wars figures that were coming out when they had the property at the time, and like RoboCop figures and like sweet figures like Swamp Thing, the Glue in the Dark. Y'all, if you were there, you know what I'm talking about. You used to open the bigger boxes with the vehicles in it and they'd fall out.
Yeah,
that was the stuff.
I periodically wish that I could time travel, and if I could time travel, I wouldn't go back in history and kill Hitler. I don't have that in me. I'm not a violent man, but I would go back to Toys R Us circa 1985 and buy everything.
Oh yeah.
It's just like I would go to my local game store, just buy everything new, and then come back to the present and be the happiest guy ever.
Yeah, just you roll in there, you find a local storage unit, and just be like, you give the guy the money. You go like,
Yeah, right. You pay for the storage.
He just paid 40-something years of storage unit fees. What book could possibly be in there? And then like when you open it up, it's like the Grail, fucking Ark of the Covenant.
Man, what a beautiful thing! What a beautiful fantasy. Okay, anyway, gonna get lost in that.
All right, listen, there's a sauce to get lost in. That's where I want to go.
So today I want to talk about MasterBook, which is a weird bit of West End Games history. Now, West End Games, I think that, their most well-known game is Star Wars, directly responsible for the extended universe of Star Wars and sort of saving Star Wars from the memory hole. And Star Wars is a very simple game. It's a D6 dice pool. You roll some dice determined by your skill value. You add up the total, beat a DC. You did the thing. It's very cinematic, very fast paced.
Easy peasy.
Yeah. Now, MasterBook comes out in 1994. I don't know if you know this, but things were a little rough for a lot of older companies in the 90s who were producing role-playing games. West End Games, like everybody else, was struggling a little bit. They basically only had Star Wars in 1994. The Torg, which had been their genre mashup game, had a lot of interesting systems, but that folded in 1993. It started in 90, ended in 93. They didn't have anything else. Paranoia had kind of gone fallow. Ghostbusters hadn't been really a thing for a while. So all they had was Star Wars, and the market was getting like really, really difficult to compete in, partly because Magic the Gathering had just come out and was on the rise, right? Sucking up all that, hobby money.
It's really funny because, quick little sidebar, I was actually just talking to a buddy of mine about this, like, how wouldn't it be cool to like open a game shop? If we were rich, we'd open up a game shop because it feels like a sucker's bet if you're not. But then like, we're talking about it, and I was like, yeah, man, it'd be like cool. You have a place, people to go, build a community, turn people on to new games and new ideas, make money off of Magic the Gathering and snacks, because that's really the only way that you're going to get money coming in regularly.
It's like Magic the Gathering and Lorcana now, right? Like that's it.
Lorcana is shockingly big. Pokemon's always big. Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah.
You're basically
it's the cards.
Flat crack and snacks.
Yeah. It's wild. Yeah, basically, Magic had some troubles in its launch. Like there was like a shortage. They just never it took them a long time to we're getting off topic, but I'm going to go for it anyway. It took them a long time to get like up to scale and meet demand. And because there was such huge demand, other people got into the, the CCG market. So there was just like a shortage of people who could print cards. It's just such a crazy time.
That's wild.
And then ostensibly a different kind of game really rippling through and damaging the overall role-playing game economy. It put a lot of people out of business. But not West End Games. West End Games was we're going to talk about this later. West End Games was undone by different symptoms that sort of shocked a lot of people, actually. But back on topic. So really competitive environment right now in 94, 95. And West End's looking for like something that they can beef up their lines with. Star Wars is doing fine, but like you don't want to just have one line. The other thing that's sort of big at the moment is Universal Systems. GURPS is doing well. The Hero System is out and doing well. You could argue that the Storyteller system through White Wolf, World of Darkness is sort of a generic enough system where like you go in playing vampire, and through vampire you learn enough of the basics of the system where you could just jump over to werewolf or oblivion or whatever else you wanted to play. So this idea of a universal kind of system is really in the air in the 90s, and West End Games was like, well, we could do that. Now, Hambone.
Oh boy.
You got a Star Wars system, very simple D6 system. What are you going to use to put under the hood of your brand new Universal system in 1994?
Obviously a D20.
You're not wrong, because that's exactly what Torg used.
Oh lordy. Go on.
Yeah, for some reason they decided to not do the D6 system. It's right there. They're making money already off of it. A lot of people play Star Wars, but instead of doing that, they go back to the well of the game that they shuttered the previous year and decide, well, this is what we're going to use for the bones of our Universal system. This is going to go over great.
Man. Here's the thing, and I'm going to tell you. You've designed games. I've designed games. A lot of our listeners have designed games. I would say the general, the general listener pool that we have plays RPGs, and they're very familiar with the D20, right? But now, you've also come to like and embrace games that have a D6. And we all know that like a D6 is actually the most accessible dice by far. Like if I ever had to roll up to a game and be like, oh shit, I forgot my dice, I could probably go to like a CVS or a Walgreens and get 6-sided dice.
Right.
In like some kind of like little tchotchke game that they have hanging, because it's the most like the D20 is obviously, the most recognizable dice in fantasy, but the D6 is the one that everyone has in every board game you've gotten since Christ left Pittsburgh, and Clue was called Cluedo.
Right. And that was a design concern for Star Wars. They literally, that was one of the reasons why it's a D6 base, is because if all else fails, they know that families have these dice laying around the house. We don't have to sell them weird pieces of plastic. But sometimes I guess you just kind of fall in love with a system. And I will give you that the Torg system, I like the Torg system a lot. In brief, you roll a D20, you compare it to a DC. The higher you get, the higher your value, your result is, the better you do. So, and if you roll a 10 or a 20, you roll again and add it. The die explodes. And there's a card mechanic that everybody has cards, including the GM, that you can play during the course of combat or regular play that modify the game. It's called the drama deck. It's very cinematic. I like it a lot. It does require it does require that you have a deck, specially printed deck. But I think it is cool, and it makes everything it injects chance into the game in an interesting narrative friendly way.
Okay.
That actually is not the system. That's a fairly simple system, right? That I just described. That's not actually the system that MasterBook uses. So when they went back to the well, they actually started with they experimented with a game called Shatterzone, which the idea of Shatterzone was like, how about we take Torg, we change it, and we make a science fiction game with it to see if we could kind of, do this, if it's scales appropriately across genres. And we're going to take basically like a general science fiction game. We're going to marry it with cyberpunk. We're going to call it Shatterzone, and we're going to use it as a clearinghouse for like all of the ideas that either come like they're obviously like riffing on derivative science fiction ideas, or they're going to use interesting things that we tried to put into the Star Wars game that Lucasfilm said, nah, don't do that, that's not Star Warsy. And Shatterzone's kind of cool in that way, and it works. It doesn't last long. I think it starts at 94 and is dead by 95. But it is basically the bare bones of what MasterBook is. Now, MasterBook, let me see if I could explain the core mechanic here. Remember, Torg was 1d20 versus a DC. Here, we roll 2d10, right?
Right.
And we need to have our skill first, like punch. All right, I have a 5 in punch. All right. And then you determine your DC. The GM is like, okay, well, it's 15. You need to beat a 15 to hit the iron golem with your fist, which sounds like a really good idea.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you roll 2d10. Do you add those results together and then add it to your skill point? No, that would be easy. You actually take that 2d10 result and you look at a chart that gives you a bonus that you add to your skill value.
What?
I know, right? Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just like cut out the middleman and just like I don't
Yeah.
yeah,
I
and
mean,
then your result. So it used to just be that like in Torg, the higher your number, the bigger your spread that you beat the DC by, the better you do. And like I guess there's some guidance for that, but you have to check a chart again in Master System to sort of like it's all formalized. So like the degrees by which you succeed, your bonuses, your good performance above and beyond is all quantified on this chart. And it's just like, man, for every roll, I got to check 2 charts.
that's a lot, man.
Yeah. Dice still explode. There's still a drama deck. The drama deck is a little bit more pared down. It all still works, but it definitely, the intention, I think, is, well, what this does is Torg was a very bombastic, pulpy system. You had the exploding dice. You wanted things to get over the top. It's literally a collision of multiple worlds. So like you have like
Yeah.
your two-fisted pulp villain like hanging out with like a sentient starfish and like Thor. Like you're mushing all of these things together and you want crazy stuff to happen. MasterBook isn't like that. It's not generic in that way. They're trying to build a system, I think, that they wanted to kind of be able to apply and then scale to different kind of feels. But that necessarily made the core book sort of low power and stodgy. But again, I don't know what they were thinking, because the stuff that the games that they actually released, MasterBook, they're all over the top.
Right.
So here's the list. And they are super weird too. Like the first couple are you're like, okay, I can see where this is going. But then the last few are just like, oh, those are going to sit on bookshelves in stores forever, which is exactly what happened. So you have Blood Shadows, which is the only unique original campaign setting that West End developed for MasterBook. It's sort of like a noir mixed with horror, or like a cult kind of vibe. It's really good. And I believe it lives on to this day using a different system. It was also well supported. There was a bunch of supplements for it. Everything else is a license, starting with World of Indiana Jones.
Okay.
Right? So TSR did an Indiana Jones game. It sucked. Theoretically, the folks who did, D6 Star Wars making a World of Indiana Jones, I'm excited about that.
Absolutely.
Trying to make an Indiana Jones game using a more realistic system, I don't really want that.
Yeah.
But it works. It works well enough. Again, pretty well supported. It's far better than the TSR game. Like if you want to play an Indiana Jones game, you should do this. World of Necroscope.
That's a cool name.
It is. Do you remember Necroscope? Necroscope was like a series of novels by Brian Lumley that like it's like about psychic vampires in the Dreamlands. they're weird, man. They're very like, and you would recognize the covers. They all have I think they're all by Les Edwards actually. And they all have like a skull of some sort on it, and sometimes it's like a wolf skull or like a vampire skull or like a demon skull.
Honestly, I could tell you, like, yeah, like, there's a lot of stuff in the Wayback Machine that we talk about that, like, I gotta really like swim around to see. But like, I specifically remember being in bookstores and seeing these covers and be like, okay, this is cool.
It was sort of like Anne Rice, Stephen King, and V.C. Andrews always sort of took up huge amounts of real estate, and they were also the horror writers that you would see in the supermarket. But
Oh yeah,
every once in a while, you would see one of Brian Lumley's Necroscope novels on like the rack at the checkout, and it was just like, oh, but it's also just like it's super weird. Looking back, it's like there's something like 30 books, and like it's probably a rich like it makes sense and it also doesn't make sense. But I will tell you, it makes a whole lot more sense than everything else. Starting with Tales from the Crypt, which uh, it's basically positioning itself to be like a generic catch-all horror game.
yeah, but with
But
an IP that people know.
yeah, but it's also it like just seems it just feels preposterous. It feels like they were just buying up licenses to do and it smacks of a certain kind of desperation.
Yeah,
There was also World of Aden, which spins out of two SSI video games that like nobody bought. It was like they were like the last two video games that SSI put out before they went bankrupt, which seems like a really good property to develop into an RPG. I don't know.
oh my god.
And then the last two are Species and Tank Girl.
We were like Species, like Natasha
Yeah.
Henstridge Species.
Yes, sir. That one. That yeah. And Tank Girl.
So Tank Girl, I can understand. Tank Girl makes sense.
But not Tank Girl the comic book, Tank Girl the movie.
It still makes sense to a degree. Understandable. I remember the Tank Girl movie, and like, it is what it is. But like, you could do an RPG of that. But
Species.
I mean, what was the art like in that book? Like, how did they
there is
how
no
did they square
art.
that circle?
It's all just production stuff. Honestly, these things look a lot and feel a lot like the leading edge games, like from a little earlier in the 90s, like the Bram Stoker's Dracula role-playing game, the Lawnmower Man role-playing game, Aliens. They had the Terminator 2 license, but I don't think that ever manifested. And it's just like big books of film stills. Like that's Tales from the Crypt. The Tales from the Crypt box set is just such a ridiculous exercise in art direction because it's a box set, which is just like, man, there's tons of stills of the Crypt Keeper from the show. And then all of the art is pretty much artists drawing the Crypt Keeper. Like there's just the only pictures in this book are pictures of the Crypt Keeper. It's absolutely ridiculous.
So I mean, like that kind of feels like a hat on a hat to a degree, because like you have like, I'm sure like there are story hooks and things where they could do like a like, even if it was just like a 1-page like cover of like, don't go down the basement, or like whatever, something other than like, artistic renderings of the Crypt Keeper. Like, it's like wrapping my head around all this stuff. Like, is the whole mechanic of the Species game to like try and not fuck the alien? Because like what else is there to do? Like the whole point of Species as a film was Natasha Henstridge, very naked, killing dudes. Oh no, it's an alien. Movie's over.
Yeah, I mean that's basically. I mean, I think that's basically the concept here. There's so many pictures of Natasha Henstridge.
Like naked Natasha Henstridge, or just like this is
well,
just...
like there is a still of like alien naked alien Natasha Henstridge.
Jesus. Okay.
It's I mean, like there are pictures of other monsters, which I guess you're supposed to kill. Oh no, there's some actual like naked illustrations too. This is a very strange book. This could only have been produced in the 90s.
Oh my god, right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the idea is that like she's just the tip of the iceberg and there's all sorts of aliens that can be hunted. But like nobody bought it. Nobody wanted that. Did they ask anybody to see if they wanted them? Something like that. I just like Mimic is the other one that I was thinking of.
Yes.
That's why I
Yeah.
got all messed up. And is Mimic that's Del Toro?
I think it is Del Toro. Let me pull up my IMDb app on this. Yeah, I mean, like, I like Mimic. Amir Sorvino was in Mimic, and it is actually Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah, there you go.
Um, based on a short story by Donald A. Wollheim. I mean, here's the thing. Like, I love weird stuff. I love charts. I love like when things get weird and you have to consult a chart like a DCC. But like,
Yes.
I like simple game mechanics where like if I just need to add dice and not check a chart, that's cool too. Or if I have to check a chart, I don't want to check two. Like, and so like trying to like overcomplicate a game that's simple, especially like something like Indiana Jones. Like to me, like, I'm jumping around here, but like the problem with like Indiana Jones on paper as like a Dungeons and Dragons property RPG is that like Indiana Jones is kind of meant to be a little more fast paced.
Right.
And like Indiana Jones would work better like Pulp Cthulhu. It'd work better as Savage Worlds. It would work better, there's several different systems it would work better as, but like, I don't know, 2d6 powered by the apocalypse, which is kind of what you already had with West End game stuff. Like, it doesn't, I don't know. You know how I feel about putting 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the Species book is probably the worst because at least the Tank Girl book, although it's mostly based on the movie, there's a lot of Jamie Hewlett art in there. So like, at the very least, you're getting Jamie Hewlett art. Man, what like yeah, and it's just like I think it lasted like 4 years, the MasterBook experiment. The first three were box sets: Tales from the Crypt, Blood Shadows, and Indiana Jones was a box set, and Necroscope is a box set. So in all of those, you get the deck of cards, the rule book for the setting, and then the MasterBook rules as a discrete book, which I believe was sold separately. But then if if you just bought that, you had to buy the deck of cards from West End. The whole thing is very, very weird. It didn't last.
Yeah, I mean, like
Surprise.
I'm not surprised, but like I get it. You got to make as much money as you can. However, the more shit you make, the more you have to sell to make money back. And like, I think a lot of people forget to make games playable. And I think that's a big issue that we face in the hobby is game designers is that at the end of the day, like it's one thing to have this crazy idea in your head and not punching down on this, not shitting on these people who have these crazy ideas in their head, because everyone should have these crazy ideas and like want to put it on paper and want to get people playing your game. But like, I think a lot of people often forget that in the end of the day, you may write the thing, but you are not going to be at everyone's table playing it. And that's why it's like
Right.
super important to make it accessible. It's super important to make it so like anyone could pick it up and plug and play and not have to worry about like, oh my, I gotta check like 9 charts and like I need a special deck of cards to do this. And now I have to learn tarot. Like, like
Yeah. I mean, I also think that like as much as like we look, this comes up all the time, right? When we talk about the like the 20th century RPG people, like I don't think that they really knew what they were doing. Like they were shooting in the dark. Like if you just look at this on paper, like basic stuff. You have the product line is a series of box sets that contain the deck of cards you need to play, the entire rule book square bound, and then a world book, which so like you get the Blood Shadows book, you get the master book rules, and then you get the set of cards. That's great, right? As an all-in-one purchase for the guy who wants to play Blood Shadows or the guy who wants to play Indiana Jones or Gal or whoever. But if I'm the guy who bought the master book rules separate, you're now charging me the cost of the master book again, plus the Blood Shadows material in the box set.
yeah, it becomes superfluous
And
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 expensive.
and I have to buy the cards separately to play. Like, you know what I mean? Like all
Yeah.
of these different configurations, like they're all solving problems, but like it's once you're doing that, you're competing against yourself and you're annoying people. So it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that's just baseline stuff before you even get into like the substance of the system or the settings that they used. It was just like they were kind of just like flailing around, and you can see it with the properties that they bought.
Yeah. I mean, I think to a degree, it's cool to include the rules in the box sets, right? But I think it's got to be one or the other because ultimately, like how many master books are you going to end up with if you buy all the box sets? You
I have
know,
four.
that's
You know,
crazy.
like so why do I have four copies of the same book?
Yeah, like if you're gonna include rules, it could be like specific rules for that specific set. It's always interesting though when we do these shows. Like we have a lot of commentary, dear listener, but and again, it is like people with microwaves looking back through time and commenting on the people who created fire.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's definitely like a thing where like sometimes I look back and I'm like, oh man, like yeah, maybe I'm a little bit too critical, but then I think, oh man, but no, it doesn't make sense. That's a
No,
lot of
hindsight's 2020, but at the
lot of dead
same
trees.
time, and you got to appreciate the mistakes that these folks made because
Oh, of
then
course.
everybody else learned from them. But interestingly, MasterBook didn't kill West End Games
No, really?
for real. You know what they did next
What?
after MasterBook failed?
What they do?
They created the D6 system. they
Oh,
they made so it's sort of agonizing because they basically they figured out how to use the D6 as like a universal system, and they included it in later Indiana Jones stuff so that you could opt like it, even though it was a master book thing, like it was they folded D6 into master book as basically like a option. And then D6 they codified it as a standalone rule book. I think the first D6 game was Men in Black, and it was pretty well received and it was pretty good system because it's D6 and it's simple and like you could totally see how that works so well with the Men in Black franchise. Like it's all accelerator, no break, and it's just of course that worked well. And then I think the last thing they published was a Xena the Warrior Princess book for D6.
yeah,
And they had
that makes sense about for that. That was right around that time. Yeah.
right, yeah. And like they tweaked the D6 and they didn't leave it alone. And I think that maybe they messed it up for the a little bit and they made it too overpowered. Because you could they changed it. They felt like they were rolling too many dice, so then they kind of they went with the White Wolf kind of model where it's like, okay, now you're counting successes. They also did a thing where you could add +3 or they basically added a couple things that like made it simpler, made it a little higher powered, and I think that like it was already like teetering on
Yeah.
too high powered.
Little OP.
But still, it makes much more sense, all told. But I promised that I would speculate on as to why West End Games died. Um, I can't find an actual definitive reason. The Wikipedia just says that I mean at the moment because that's publicly editable. But at the moment it says that West End went to get their payroll and the bank wouldn't let them take any money out. And then basically spiraled and they went and had to file bankruptcy. Once they filed bankruptcy, all their licenses were no longer bound. So everything basically left.
Oh, they lost all the IP. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shit.
But and like that's sort of like okay, but why did the bank do that? Why did the bank suddenly just not extend them the credit that they were, comfortably using before then? So West End Games was owned by a company called Bucci Importing.
Uh-oh.
So once you start looking into Bucci imports, you learn some things. Basically, they seem to have had a bunch of like little subsidiary companies, but they were primarily a importer of shoes and leather goods. And they did really well in the 80s, importing Italian women's shoes. Now, all of this is 100% speculation of stuff that I found looking around on the internet last night. Uh, and I was looking through the boards. This is the kind of thing that I love, going back and like trying to find stuff on forums and stuff, because like people are just kind of just hypothesizing publicly.
Right.
Um, and they often come up with like really funny stuff. So the one theory I read was that in the 80s they did really well because Nancy Reagan wore their shoes at Reagan's second inauguration. And then, over time, the trend faded, and the Italian women's, high-heeled shoes market shrank, which put them in a bad spot. But then somebody else was like, oh, but they were also the primary importer of Bruno Magli shoes. Hembo, do you remember why I know the name Bruno Magli shoes?
No, not off the top of my head.
So there was this really high profile murder case where this football player was accused of murder. And his name was O.J. Simpson, and they had a shoe print at the scene, and it was a Bruno Magli
Oh,
shoe. And the DA's office did a lot of work trying to figure out, trying to pin that shoe on him, or put his foot in that shoe, I guess is the more apt way of putting it.
it's like the worst case of Cinderella ever, but go on.
So yeah, they couldn't do it, but that shoe was really infamous for a minute, or that shoe manufacturer's name. And apparently Bucci, now again, I don't know this for sure, but some guy on the internet said that Bucci was the prime importer of Bruno Magli shoes. And basically they went from luxury shoes that were making a lot of money to overnight, because of their connection to the OJ Simpson case, the market just dried up. And that, plus some creative accounting that they had been doing, which probably made West End Games weaker than it was in actuality, caused Bucci to go out of business, or to file for bankruptcy and liquidate, which, because West End Games was a wholly owned subsidiary, cost West End Games to also be under the auspices of that bankruptcy, which I think is a pretty good explanation as to why the bank all of a sudden was like, no, we can't give you several $1,000s to pay your employees, because we're not going to get that money back.
So on top of everything else, O.J. Simpson also killed West End Games, allegedly.
I mean, it sounds like it makes for a pretty good internet legend at the very least.
Oh my God, the juice is loose. I don't even know where to go from here, man. Do you have any final thoughts on the MasterBook?
Uh, I mean, no, the reason, so the reason we're talking about MasterBook is that MasterBook week in 2025 is the last week of posts that I have to write. And I was struggling with it. So I figured if I came on the show and did the research to talk about it for an episode, it would like order my thoughts so that I'd be able to do the week of posts. And I think it's a success. We'll find out. I don't know when that's slated to run in 2025, but we'll find out soon.
Well, very cool. Oh, this is another episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can people find you on the internet?
They could find me on vintagerpg.com, where all the posts go. And starting next year, that's where all the posts will be. Instagram will be no more posts daily. It's going to be weekly recap post, probably on Monday, recapping the previous week. So if you like seeing the stuff daily, you got to come to my website to see it, because Instagram is just depressing now.
Yeah. I mean, I hardly my engagement is in the toilet, so I'm right there with you. You can find me across the internet at John McGuire RPG, mostly posting on Instagram, and I've been going out places. In fact, we are gonna definitely have him on to talk about it at some point later in the year, probably November. But Alex, our editor, is in the Dungeons and Dragons 20-sided tavern now on Broadway. And I went over the weekend to see it, and I had an absolute blast. And I'm not just saying this because Alex is listening, actively editing me, saying nice things about him. But Alex was the DM that night. You could see pictures and his opening little monologue on my Instagram right now. It's actually in the grid, not in the stories, because I want it to live there forever. I cannot express how much fun I had at the D&D 20-sided tavern. Highly recommend you check it out. Unless you're a square who doesn't like fun, this is the show for you. Absolute blast heading out there, catching up with Alex. Also meeting Alex for the first time in person, which was also very cool. Got to give him a big old ham bone hug. So definitely check that out. Neon Lords Kickstarter is still going strong. You have about 10 days left by the time this episode airs to get in on the Neon Lords Deities and Demi Bros Kickstarter. Definitely worth checking out. It's fully funded, and it's at the point now where it's rapidly unlocking like every stretch goal. Like Brian is kind of thinking of stretch goals on the fly because he keeps unlocking stretch goals. So definitely check that out. Deities and Demi
kit,
Bros.
It's on
Backer Kickstarter.
Kit.
Oh my God, it's not Backer Kit.
It's the iPod Kleenex Vaseline problem.
It's Nike all over again. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Brian's Neon Lords is over on Backer Kit. Neon Lords Deity, Demi Bros. Definitely boogie on down there and check it out. If you want to pick up a copy of Brain Eaters, you could get it over at braineatersrpg.com. We have a decent amount left in stock over on our store, but they are going fast. So Brain Eaters RPG, get it in time to play for Halloween. Zombie survival horror at its very best, written by your old buddy HB and Brian Shutter from the Neon Lords. If you want to pick up some 3-2-1 action RPG books, you can head on over to Exalted Funeral. They got the stuff you're looking for, including stuff that's not 3-2-1 action RPG, because you're going to shop there anyway. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. And if you really like the show, want to become a patron, patreon.com/vintagerpg. We got a behind the scenes look at the stuff that Stu's working on. We got a behind the scenes look at the stuff that I'm working on. At the $10 level, you can get it in a West Marches game with Stu. For $5, you can get in and play an RPG with me every month. As little as $1 a month, you get early release episodes, and we got a Discord community that we'd love for you to be a part of. Patreon.com/vintagerpg. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.